this informal talk about my journey to discover the importance of including dignity in tourism studies. So first of all, I want to share some acknowledgements. And let me share my presentation. First of all, I would like to acknowledge the influence of 4 beautiful women. 2 of them are here. I'm glad to see Anke, and I want to thank them for the impact that they have in not only in my research but also in my life. First of all, Alicia, thank you for making me part of this journey and other projects that we've been working on, and I'm very glad that we have become very close and started not only a research project but a friendship. Here you will also see my mentor, my doctoral advisor, Dr. Tassin Jamal, who has taught me the importance of conducting research that impacts people, and in particular minority and disadvantaged people, and who has taught me how to think critically, how to write critically, and how to be a good scholar, or attempt to be a good scholar. And also Dr. Higgins de Boyles, who is tirelessly working to bring justice in tourism. And my partner in crime, Dr. Wickelbach. Hi, Anke, can you say hi?
Hello, I'm delighted to work with you, and I'm excited about this seminar.
Thank you. I cannot see the persons right now, so if you want to raise a question, just yell, and I will stop talking. And also, I would like to thank my colleagues at Universidad of Monterrey who have been supporting me with some of the ideas in working with dignity in tourism. But before I delve into the purpose of my presentation, which is to share my theoretical and empirical journey in examining how tourism can be a motor or a vehicle to repair violations of dignity in minority groups, I need to tell you how my interest started. And it started with when I was a graduate student. I was the teaching assistant for a trip to Mexico. I had to assist my advisor managing a group of 21 young American travelers who wanted to see the cultural heritage of Mexico. And we were visiting the archaeological site of Chichen Itza back in 2007. And a situation stuck with me for the rest of the trip, and actually the rest of my life, which was seeing very little Maya kids trying to sell souvenirs to young and rich American tourists. So I was looking at this and I was asking myself, why this going on? Why would they feel that strangers are in their communities and strangers are, they were almost begging tourists to buy little things from them in their own land, in their own culture. So the question that stuck with me was, why is this happening? What do Maya people feel when they see rich tourists, which shows differential in income, in power, in everything, and they're in their own land and they're suffering from poverty, disadvantages? And the words that came to my mind was, this is not fair, this is unjust. What can we do about it? So I turned that into my research interest, and I said, let me see what sustainable tourism, because I was studying sustainable tourism, has to say about justice and equity in tourism, and in particular in relation to culture. So I started delving into the literature, and effectively, equity was one of the main principles of sustainable tourism, but it focused on the equitable distribution of income among different groups. It wasn't satisfying at the moment. So I started to research more about what were the discourses related to cultural justice in tourism. And there were very, very, very few. There were very little empirical or theoretical studies that address differential impacts of tourism among different groups. There were some that analyzed differences in income by gender or social class, or the unequal distribution of tourism and recreation amenities among class groups, or distribution of socioeconomic outcomes, but none of them were considered the differential impacts in cultural heritage. So that I made that the purpose of my doctoral research, which was to conduct a theoretical, grounded, and empirically driven study of justice and equity for minority, low-income, and cultural groups in a tourism setting. What I wanted to explore was what multiple stakeholders felt that was happening in regards to equity and justice in a very popular destination. In particular, in regards to the cultural heritage, what were the practices, policies, and hierarchies that were affecting equity and justice, and why such issues emerge. And based on my findings, I did an extensive field work in the Riviera Maya, visiting key and popular tourism destinations, but also I was looking at different destinations and different life cycles, popular and also emerging rural destination. I spoke to approximately 50 people, Maya people, to see how they felt about tourism, whether they thought that tourism development was just, what was going on, how was their participation in tourism decision making. I spoke to tourism directors. I spoke to more than 70 stakeholders overall. And this research helped me develop a framework to cultural justice in tourism, where I propose 4 dimensions to bring justice to minority groups. These dimensions had to be with labor, economic development, the recognition and respect of cultural groups, and mechanism to restore justice where it was violated. This framework has been the inspiration of other scholars. I haven't published it due to time constraints, family constraints, but I'm glad that I've seen it mentioned in other papers. But from this research, my advisor and I published 2 important papers: Sustainable Tourism, Justice and an Ethic of Care, and Tourism Governance and Policy with our Justice. However, I can share with you the research and the dissertation. In my research in Quintana Roo, I found issues that needed to be explored, that they were not related to, they were related to justice, but there was something else that the data was telling me. And it had to do with cultural racism. There was a lot of instances of marginalization, exploitation, and cultural disrespect of people, Maya people, that were performed by local Mexicans. One might think that tourists were part of this cultural racism, but not. It was the own Mexican that were, in a way, marginalizing, insulting, ridiculing indigenous people. And it had an impact on the identity and self-esteem of them. I'm going to share a couple of quotes. This cab driver from Playa del Carmen says that they have, people from Mexico City, they have underestimated me. They are no at all. They say, oh, poor little Maya, he's never left his ranch, his farm, his village. And one thinks, whoa, he comes from the capital. He's prepared. And because you don't have any education, you feel left behind, intimidated. I felt hurt. They have insulted me. Chilangos, which is the nickname for Mexican city, people from Mexico City, and Veracruz, people from Veracruz, they have come from other places to intimidate the pinche Mayita, which means how they call themselves. And this was repetitive among many participants. They were hurt by how they were treated by other Mexicans. And here is a laundry attendant. The ones from Monterrey treat us like if we were nothing and making fun of our accent. They come here wanting to make fun of us, and they tell us, what's up, Yuca? Yuca is a derogatory name for people from Yucatan. without even knowing us. Foreign people ask you, you know Maya? And they ask me things in Maya and I explain to them. It makes me feel because people like those from Monterrey, they're very aggressive with Maya. They despise you. So there was a pattern of disrespect, humiliation from local Mexicans, but also dignity. I wasn't thinking about the word dignity in that time, but kind of a healing when they spoke to international tourists, because contrary to how they were being treated by Mexicans, international tourists were more interested in their culture. They treat them well. They encourage them to speak Maya. This is another example from my dissertation. This is a housekeeper too. There were many people that made fun of us, mainly Mexicans, people who were with us. They used to say, oh, you have a Maya face. You don't know anything. You're Maya. You don't even know how to hold a spoon. Americans treat you better. They ask us to speak in Maya and write that we say Maya. They also encourage us to wearing the hipil, which is their traditional dress. So there was something there that I knew I needed to explore. But you start working. I had children. I had a new job. So I left that data, marinate in my dissertation. But then I went to a conference in Toronto in 2018, and I was walking the streets, and I ran across this sign, and it says respect and dignity. So I remember my dissertation, and I knew that what I was hearing in my dissertation about treatment, about respect, it all come out with dignity. So I started wondering, okay, but dignity is such a big word. And what exactly is dignity? Who has dignity? How has dignity been conceptualized in the context of tourism? And who has written about dignity in tourism? And just like when I started exploring the topic of justice, and it was very few words, also with dignity. There were very, very few works. One of them was Anke's work on labor dignity, work dignity. So it took me many months to get familiarized with the concept of dignity. I had to read a lot about in the field of development studies, humanism, philosophy, even medicine, conflict resolution, and humanistic management, which I found that it has not found its way in tourism. And it's a good discipline to look at when we talk about humanism and dignity. From all these months of reading and trying to understand this concept, I started to move my research interest from justice to dignity from indigenous groups. And several works emerged. First of all, an attempt to conceptualize dignity in tourism in the Encyclopedia of Tourism and Marketing. We tried to put forward concerns and issues affecting dignity in the context of tourism, in the physical dimension, cultural dimension, and economic dimension. What were the processes and dynamics that could hurt dignity for people and for indigenous groups? I started working with a colleague from my university to put forward theoretical, how can I say, discourse on why it was important to think about dignity in the context of justice and indigenous groups. So the first work we did was called Humanism, Dignity, and Indigenous Justice. And we took the case of the Maya train. It's a mega project that the past government of Mexico is building to bring economic development to the southern states of Mexico. And there are big expectations about this mega project. So we thought, okay, if we can start this mega project from zero, how would it look like for indigenous group? If this is an opportunity to start over with economic and people's dignity, how would it look like? So we propose some principles for mega projects to bring dignity to indigenous people. The dignity restorations, that means all those actions that can remedy violations to people unconditional worth, freedom, autonomy, and identity, especially Mexico, where the dignity has been severely violated due to post-colonial dynamics, classism, and racism. We also propose principles for dignity protection, that is to safeguard individual intrinsic worth, freedom, autonomy, and identity. And finally, for dignity promotion, that is the well-being creation and human flourishing. So we move forward to protect their dignity, to make people feel like they are worthy, they can flourish through tourism. Also, we wrote a theoretical paper with Anke and Mario about dignity in tourism employment and how would a dignifying workplace in tourism look like. And we define this as a dignifying tourism workplace will not treat indigenous people as mere means or cheap labor, like it is happening on many destinations, where the indigenous people are just cheap labor. But instead, they are visible, reachable, and value members of its workforce, embracing them as individuals with aspirations and a desire to thrive, live a dignified and fulfilling life. Then I started to explore dignity through my students, and they were really, really happy about it. And I supervised this thesis called Empirically Examining Dignity in Their Workplace. And we moved from theoretical propositions to empirically assess what are the dimensions or labor conditions that affect tourism workers' sense of dignity. We did secondary research. It was a mixed method study, 9 in-depth interviews with tourism workers, and 396 surveys in the Riviera Maya. And we found 6 dimensions of tourism employment that brings dignity to people. Self-realizations, or the feeling that employees are doing something important. Good treatment from supervisors, co-workers, and tourists. Inclusion in tourism decision-making. Participation in labor life. Supportive supervision. This means that people or workers feel very dignified when their supervisor stands up for them. And here in Mexico, tourism workers are very prone to be mistreated by tourists and their bosses. But for instance, if a tourist tells them that they're lying and they have bad service, but it wasn't true because they only wanted to get freebies or a free night, they felt very dignified when their supervisor stood up for them and confronted this lying tourist. They have their backs, they said, and they felt that they were worthy. Tourist recognition for a good job, as a thank you, remembering their names, that brings dignity to people who used to feel that they're invisible. Work-life balance, having a stable number of days off so they can visit their families, they can engage in cultural practices, having a good shift, I mean, not 12 hours, but maybe 8 hours, having the opportunity to request time off to participate in family reunions or school reunions for the kids. And then the major big project that I'm working on with actually Anke, and here thank you for inviting me to join this project with the British Academy. It is called Dignity for Indigenous People Through Tourism, a capability approach. This is a working project, and Anke and I are looking at what are the factors and conditions that are conducive to enabling and protecting the dignity of indigenous people in tourism. And we're working with a small community called Yashuna in Yucatan. It has 800 people and is rich in natural and cultural heritage. It has its own cenote, its own archaeological sites, gastronomy, handcraft, living language. So we're looking at what are the capabilities that will allow local people to thrive in tourism and to get a sense of dignity. And I won't go into details because we're working on it, and it's very complex what we've been finding. So stay tuned for the paper. And on the side, like I said, it is important to involve your students. Anke and I did a project called How to Maximize the Benefits of Tourism and the Dignity of Indigenous Groups to Tourism, where students had to choose one or two indigenous groups and make proposals, not only to protect their culture, but ways to make them feel valued and included in the tourism chain. I'm exploring through undergraduate thesis the concept of open hiring in tourism. Open hiring is that model where you hire people from disadvantaged groups without any barriers that can hinder their employment, like interviews, CVs, certificate of good conduct. So the first people who sign for a job, the first people that will get it. And here in Mexico, due to this complex social dynamics, we're finding out ways to promote open hiring. We develop service learning projects. Specifically, we develop a code of ethics for Yashuna, and we transfer those results. Let me see if I can put the video when we transfer the result of the research to the local community. I think I can. Now it froze. I'm sorry, I wanted to be fancy here, but I could not. Let me open the presentation again. And not put the video. Can you see it, Alicia?
No, we are unable to see it. Okay, now we are seeing it.
I won't show the video because it will freeze the
Okay.
computer. But anyway, we develop a code of ethics for people to visit the archaeological site of Yashuna, the cenote, and the community, and the student transfer the research to the community so they could use it. And then we also establish a humanistic innovation laboratory at my university. And what we look for is to advance research that is related to dignity and humanistic management in tourism. And that's been the journey. And I just want to say some concluding thoughts about this journey. When we speak about dignity violations, sometimes we tend to blame tourism. But what we have been finding out here is that most of dignity's violation, that means to the people's self-esteem, is rooted in colonial past and present classism and racism within the country. And I'm speaking for Mexico and Colombia because of our past. And where indigenous group and African descendants are at the bottom of society. Much needs to be changed in the society itself and how we reevaluate people's identity, how we treat other people, and before we can move on. And however, tourism is a vehicle to restore dignity of indigenous groups. I do believe it has a lot of potential to heal those wounds, heal the marginalization, heal the disrespect that people have. But it's a long journey. Starting with students is transformative and brings hope to the journey. And then we can move on to tourism companies, tour operators, destination management. But it's in post-colonial destination, it will take a long time. It will take a lot of reevaluation of ourselves, our identity, and how we relate to others. But there is hope. And I just want to thank you for listening to my journey. It has been very transformative for me, for my students, for my colleagues, and even for my children who I bring with me to my research. And with that, I hope I will welcome any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Blanca. I wanted to take a moment to thank you for accepting the invitation for this talk that was inspiring, and also for your invaluable contributions to research focused on dignity and tourism. And I think that you are a guiding light and reminding us the profound connections between human values and the tourism experience and background. So I think that your work elevates the research focused on equity and respect on our field. And it's a privilege to collaborate with you and having you today here talking about this topic. Thank you so much. So now we can proceed further with questions, comments, discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Alicia, for your kind words.
Thank you so much, Blanca.